Hi, my name is Rasmus Haslund, and today I'll be doing a vBrownbag session on Veeam Top 10 Common Performance Misconfigurations. Actually, this was a presentation I did earlier at the Veeam user group together with fellow Veeam user group member Mads Fogh, but I'll just be doing it alone for this vBrownbag session. So some of the things that you might be experiencing when you're using Veeam, as a loyal customer, you might be doing upgrades over time. So when you start doing upgrades, you could have been using perhaps version 6, version 7, version 8. You might be missing out on features if you're not aware of the release notes. So one such bit is the parallel processing feature, which is actually not enabled by default unless it's a clean installation. So you might want to go ahead and go in and check your settings and make sure you have this enabled. Another such setting is the compression level. So in prior versions, the optimal setting would be optimal, but when you upgrade, this would actually be changed to high because a new level of compression, new optimal compression level was introduced. And so you might be having an unnecessarily high CPU load while you're actually performing your backup jobs. If you've been a long-term customer as well, you might also have seen that the default backup mode was reverse incremental. If you're still using that for your jobs, then it potentially could be advantageous to your performance if you change it to forward incremental, or it could even be forever forward incremental. Another such performance setting that you might be seeing is the whole unicorn power. So if you have lots of CPU power going on, you might want to make sure that you're actually using all of that CPU. So I was at a customer and I noticed that he was complaining about his backup times, and we went to take a look at the one physical proxy he had, and as you can see, he actually had 12 cores available. This was great, but when we went into Veeam and took a look, he was still using the default settings, which meant he was only using 2 of those 12 cores. So we went ahead and we bumped that up to 10. Now with the sort of best practices by Veeam, you would have set this to 12. But because this one customer was using this server both for the proxy and as a repository, I just sort of said, okay, let's try and keep it down and just leave it at 10 so we still have some CPU power left for the repository. Another such setting exists on the backup repositories where the default limit is also 4 tasks. So this is another setting that you might want to consider adjusting a little bit, maybe up, maybe even removing it completely. Just sort of make sure you don't change all of the settings all at once. Sort of take one setting at a time, see how it works off your environment, and then you can sort of start tuning on the next parameters as well. Another thing I've seen a lot of customers do is what a lot of people would refer to as daisy chaining. So they've set up a lot of backup jobs, and then they've made the whole configuration on the backup jobs in a way that once a backup job is finished, it will automatically launch the next backup job. Now, this may have been a really good way of configuring these jobs in some of the prior versions, such as version 6. But now with version 7 and 8, you really shouldn't be doing that anymore. Instead, you should have been using parallel processing. And with parallel processing, basically, you'll make sure that you can get the full performance. The problem with these jobs is that it will only do parallel processing across the jobs that are run concurrently. But because you're daisy chaining the jobs, it won't run more than one job concurrently at the same time. Hence, if you have just one VM in the one job, it will only process that one VM. And when it's finished, it will do one VM and so on. Another item I have seen quite often is customers doing direct SAN access for the backups. Now, this is a fantastic setup. You'll probably get really good performance from this. But the problem that you might incur is if you're using Fiber Channel or maybe iSCSI, that the proxy also needs to have access to any new LUNs or data stores that you set up. So in this environment, this was a customer using iSCSI, and they have sort of been upgrading all of the data stores from VMFS 3 to 5, and instead of upgrading them, they decided, hey, let's make new data stores, and then move all of the data, and then delete the old data stores. Now, this was a great idea. I can really appreciate what they were doing. The only problem was just when you're using iSCSI, it actually had access to the new LUNs, but you have to go into the iSCSI initiator and click connect on each of the new LUNs. Otherwise, the proxy cannot actually retrieve any data from them. So as you can see in this screenshot, he thought everything was using direct SAN because it had been in the past, but suddenly now everything was becoming really slow, and it was because it was using NVD on network mode for actually retrieving those backups. Another item on your backup to-do list that can consume a lot of time is indexing. So a lot of people have indexing enabled just because it's a checkbox that they can check. And so it's important to really understand what does this actually mean. So the indexing is only relevant if you're going to be doing searches for files across backup jobs, across VMs in Enterprise Manager. So the first question you can ask yourself is, do I actively use Enterprise Manager? Do I even have it installed? If the answer is no, then you should just simply disable this checkbox, because if you don't even have Enterprise Manager installed, it will just constantly be doing all of these indexing, saving those indexes to some location on the backup server, and they'll just be left there indefinitely, taking up space. But the worst part is you're taking a lot of time from your backup window. Each individual VM indexing could be upwards to 3 minutes, even more. So if you have 100 VMs, that's a lot of time being wasted on the actual backups. So when would it then be appropriate to use these indexes? Well, if you do actively use Enterprise Manager, it could be a good way to be searching for files on multiple file servers, or if you even have Enterprise Plus licensing, maybe you want to be doing the self-restore using the self-restore portal in Enterprise Manager, and for that to work, you need to have indexing enabled. To sort of scope out what will you be using, do you have a good use case or not, and then take it from there. Another item that you can take a look at is the whole distribution of Veeam components. So it may be that you have one physical proxy, and this was really good when you deployed it, but now maybe with the amount of virtual machines you have to process, maybe there's a sort of load problem. Obviously, if you have money to throw at it, you could just scale out with additional physical proxies perhaps, but if you don't have budget for that, another option could be to just use some virtual Veeam backup proxies. And in that case, basically, you just set up new virtual machines, maybe even one for every VMware host you have, set it to maybe just 1 or 2 CPU cores, and then you're off. And then at some point in time, when you have budget, you can expand with the physical proxies if this is your choice of proxy. The last item I have on my bucket list here is bottlenecks on the repository. So for a lot of customers, they have really fast production storages, really good proxies, lots of CPU, and then they choose to use some 2-disk NAS. And then they can't really understand why is the target the bottleneck in this whole process. So for this customer, actually, we can see that the processing rate was 3 megabytes per second, and quite obviously the bottleneck was the target in this instance. If this is the case, what can you do? Well, one thing is you can consider, should I buy different storage? But before just throwing money at the problem, you can sort of evaluate the options you have available in Veeam already. I previously mentioned that one of the default backup modes was the reverse incremental. So take a look, is this what you're using? If so, that's a lot of random I/O that's going to be occurring all of the time. That could be the actual root cause of why the processing rate is so low. So in this actual instance of the customer, we changed it from reverse incremental to further forward incremental, and the processing rate bumped up to like 30 megabytes per second. He was quite happy with that increase. Now, what you need to be aware of if you do something like that is further forward sort of has a merging time once the backup job is finished, but you don't really care about that, because the important thing is you want to keep the sort of the backup time low, because otherwise the snapshot on the virtual machines will be growing quite heavily, and then once you want to get those consolidated again, that will take a lot of load on your production storage. If you're using the further forward, yes, there will be quite a lot of load on the backup storage, but it will occur only once the backup job is actually finished. So it's sort of post-processing process. But this is actually all of the 10 items I have on my to-do list for now. Thank you for watching.